This is another DoubleCAD training session, and you can also draw along with me on paper using your drawing equipment. You can use this as a CAD lesson for DoubleCAD, or you can use it as an additional exercise on paper. Let's start. As always, we are going to make sure that our layers are set up correctly, and to do that we're going to go to Options and Drawing Setup. Under there we already have spoken about these in previous videos, so you can go and look at my previous videos to see what are the default settings that I use. As they are set here, I'm going to leave them. Most importantly, I'm going to make sure I'm in the metric system, that my scale is 1:1, and that's an absolute type. Units is millimeters, everything is millimeters. For my purposes, I'm using a precision of 1. Now I'm going to go to angles, layers, my most important part. Here I just check that I've got all the layers as I require them. And as I've said in my previous videos, you will just make sure that your outlines and your solid lines are set to 0.5. And as I have mentioned before, I set mine to 1 during this recording so that you can see the difference between my solid lines and my constructions lines just that much better. But for your purposes and for printing purposes, you will make use of a 0.5 line width, and I'm gonna say okay. Here in our canvas, the one thing that you should start off by considering is the workspace that you have available on your paper. So this example drawn here is a template that I've drawn that is 420 by 297 to represent the outline edges of a normal A3 paper, and therefore I am using exactly the correct size so that if I were to print this out onto an A3 paper, that my settings will be the same as that of the actual paper. Therefore, on our open space here, which we refer to as the drawing space, we must make sure that we will fit in our drawing both in the width or length as well as in the height. And if I just look at my measurements given on my question, we can get an idea, although you will see that with some questions there are sometimes distances that would not give us the total length or the total height, but that you have to defer that from the information provided in your drawing. Let's use an example. So if we were to look at the full length of space or width that this drawing would use up on our canvas, we can just get a general idea of what that would be, so that we have enough space. So firstly, it's this 10 millimeters for the radius of this rounding, then another 20 millimeters for that elongated area, which gives us a total of 30 if we count them together. Another rounding which gives us 10 millimeters, so that is 30 plus the 10 gives us 40. Then there's a measurement here that is not defined as such. But if we make use of the information provided in the dimensions, like using this angle and this height, we can get a general idea of what that distance could be, although we must estimate it for the time being. And that is where you just look at the values provided and more or less what that distance could be. So this could be anything between 15 to 20, and to be safe, I'm going to say that distance roughly is 20, although I know it should be a little bit less. So we already have 40 millimeters from the dimensions already provided, and now we are going to add the other more or less 20. So that gives us a total of 60 thus far. Then we see we have a square type shape here that is defined as 40 millimeters, so that plus the 60 we already have is 100. And then we have an extra bit here which we can also estimate safely to say at least 20 millimeters. It might be less, but let's work with the 20. So that gives me from the far left rounding to this far right corner more or less a distance of 120 millimeters for the length or width of this drawing that I need. For the height, that's a bit easier. We have a defined 55 millimeters height up to that intersection of the center point of the circle. We know that more or less the square is 40 by 40, and more or less we will then have 20 millimeters from the center up. So we can safely assume if we say 55 plus 20, we would get to 75. But let's be safe and give ourselves a little bit more room because we still need to add dimensions properly. And therefore, let's just make it for what it's worth, 55 plus 25, and that will round it off to 80. So we have a total length / width of 120 and a total height more or less of 80 millimeters. Those are the estimates that we work with for this. So when we start our planning, we're going to start with a vertical construction line. We don't want to start too close to the border line. Now, I always say more or less 20 millimeters away from it should be safe. That gives us room for dimensions as well. So I'm just going to more or less place it there. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal construction line, also enough space from the top down to give me room for dimensions that I might need to add, and I plot it down there. Those are two light construction lines that I would draw on my paper as well as on my CAD canvas. Now that I have a reference point to start off with, I'm going to use the circle tool as I always do for my measuring. And then from that intersection, I'm going to go and measure at least the 120 millimeters that I have more or less determined. That is for the total length, and that shows us that we have more than enough space on this scale of 1:1 that is required to do this drawing. And then the height, obviously, if we see that there's 120 millimeters, so we will definitely have enough space. So we don't even have to measure that out now unless you want to for purposes of starting from a starting point. So let's go about doing that very quickly. I'm going to use 80 millimeters as a height reference there. So let me tab through to radius of 80. And then I plot that there, and I'm going to use my horizontal construction line tool / waterline tool to place that there. So now I have at least 80 millimeters to work with there, and I'm going to also now place a 90-degree construction line there. So within that rectangle, I know my model will fit. I could even have fitted in, most likely if it was a scale of 2:1. But in this case, we are drawing, based on the question, a scale of 1:1. So let's take a look at the question. In the question, it says here, copy the given image to a scale 1:1, making use of your drawing instruments and add any 3 dimensions. And then the specifications is that no freehand is allowed. Obviously, on your paper, you will have to make use of your drawing equipment. And all line types must be correct. So your center lines, your construction lines, your solid outlines, your hidden detail if required, dimension lines, everything must be the correct line types. And then finally, neatness, accuracy and line work will be assessed, as is the case in all technical drawings. And if we look at our reference image / example image, we now also have a very clear idea of where we will start and where we will end. So for here, it actually depends on your preference where you would like to start the drawing. I like to look at what are common features that will give me a quick start and that will actually help me with my workflow to continue with my dimensions in an easier way. Now for me personally, you can find it a different way. There are 2 places where I think can be a good start in this drawing. Either the bottom left hand corner where this 45-degree center line starts, or the intersection here at the circle where our 45-degree center lines meet at the center there. That could also be a good starting position. Now, some exams or tests, those starting positions will be given to you and you will have to start from those. If it's a clear and open canvas like the one we have, then you can start wherever you like. Now, some people might choose other starting reference points, but I'm going to decide either on one of those 2, and I'm going to for this purpose start with this one over here at the bottom left, because I have now easy access to this 45-degree angle that will lead me to the second part of the image, and I also have a starting point then for the rest of this first part of the image on the left hand side. So now if I decide to do that and start with the starting point, I need to look at my measurements to know from the measurements that I have determined here on the bottom left, how far must I go inward. So obviously if I were to go and draw a vertical center line here on that reference image, this distance from there to there is what I need to determine. So that is easy because we already have that 10 millimeters up to the center point of that arc that we have there, and then there's a total of 20 up to that center, and from the proportions we can see that that's a 10 and 10 millimeters, which means we will have a 10 millimeter to the center point plus another 10 millimeters, and that gives us the 20 from the far left to that starting point. So for me that is a good starting point, since no other starting point has been provided. So now what I'm going to do is, back here at my canvas, I'm just going to draw a light construction line, because I want to get rid of these water lines, because these arcs are going to interrupt and interfere with my planning. So therefore I'm just going to select the line tool, and I'm going to select the constructions layer, and I'm just going to draw a light construction line that is the outline or perimeter of my drawing for the time being. Remember, this is just an estimation. This is not necessarily the accurate distances. And then once I've gotten that, I know that's my workspace in which I would do my drawing, and I'm going to go edit, clear all constructions. Now, not everybody will do it this way. Sometimes you will just draw a construction line to get yourself these two reference points on the Y and the X axis. That all is your decision. So now that I have this far left distance, I know that I want to go increments of distances from left to right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot construction lines from left to right for this first part of my reference image on the left hand side. And for that I'm going to go to my circle tool again to measure off. I'm going to measure off 10 millimeters, and I will do that a few times more. So we have 30 there. If we look at our reference image, there's the first 10 millimeters, the second 10 millimeters, and then I need another 10 millimeters to that center point of this round arc here. So that means 10, 20, 30, 40 in total. So I'm just going to do those for the time being, not too many. Just want to use the necessary construction. So now that I have those reference points, I'm going to go and draw in light construction lines, vertical construction lines. That is going to just be my guide for when I do my measurements. So I don't need all these lines or the full length of those lines, but for the time being, this is just the way I like to draw and plan out my layout of the drawing. Once I have that, I know I've got now the 10 millimeters. This is just to help improve my workflow, and immediately when I've done that, I just want to remind myself of this 45-degree center line that I have. That's going to go indefinite for the time being, and that starts at this 20 millimeters from the far left inward. So therefore I'm going to go here to where that line is. I'm going to select my line construction tool, and I'm going to immediately select the center lines tool. So that is then on this reference point, and I'm going to zoom in properly so that I can snap there, and then let's zoom out. I'm going to just stretch it indefinitely for the time being, and my angle I'm going to say is 45 degrees, and I plot it down and escape out of that. The properties of the center line I will adjust later when we reach that stage. Now I know that's there, and I know that I can start with the left hand part of my drawing. And for that, I know there's a solid baseline of 20 millimeters that start from the starting point to the right, and I've got the 40 millimeter height. That also is a solid, uninterrupted line upwards. So for that, I'm going to measure out that 20 millimeters as a solid outline. So I'm selecting the line tool, and then I'm selecting my correct layer, which is my outline and solids layer. So from that starting point, 20 millimeters to the right, and I escape out of that. So there I have the first baseline. Now I want to go 40 millimeters up as per my reference image. So if I look again, always double check that you are using the right measurements of 40 millimeters, and therefore I'm again going to use my construction tool, circular construction tool, to measure the height of 40 millimeters. Once I have that, I can immediately go to my line tool and immediately measure that height of the line and escape out of that. So there I have two solid outlines already. Now remember, you would draw this on a 0.5 millimeter thickness on your CAD, and on paper this will be a nice solid outline, A-type line, and then you can draw this either following me here on CAD or on paper. Now let's go to the next distance. The next distance is straight out 180 degrees at a distance of 10 millimeters at that 40 millimeter height. You can either draw the guideline for your construction here, or you can just draw the 10 millimeter solid line, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to, by the way, if you have your selection active and you have your line tool active, make sure that you are still on the correct layer. And if you want this line to go out straight horizontally, you just hold in the shift key, and then you can just click and drag, or not click, you just hold the shift key and you just drag. And then once you are happy that's the right angle, which is 180 degrees, you can just put in the distance of 10 millimeters and enter. There we have that part now, and I'm going to escape out of that. So now I've gotten all of this so far. Now we reach the point where we actually have an arc. And we know that arc has a radius of 10, which means it's a diameter of 20, which means that from this line here, we will have 20 millimeters up to the top. And that means that we have up to the center only 10 millimeters, so we can determine those distances already. So coming back here to our answer, I'm going to go and measure now on these guidelines, and this is part of the reason why I like to draw these light construction lines as guidelines, because in CAD you always need reference points, and this just makes my job a bit easier. So I'm going to go to this reference point here, and I'm going to measure up 10 millimeters as a radius for my first measurement, and then I also am going to measure up 20 millimeters for the total height of that round. And that gives me a reference point for the center point as well as the top. Once I have that, I'm going to make use of my horizontal construction line tool and use that as a guideline for the time being. Place it there, snap it to those reference points, and then I'm going to use my line tool. I'm going to make sure it's on the constructions layer, and I'm going to draw for myself two light construction lines out to the right, indefinite in length. And I'm going to do the same with the uppermost part, also out to the right, indefinite in length. We're going to clear that up later. Now that I have that, I know this will be this reference point, the center of my rounding that goes around here, which is the center point that I see here on my example or reference image. So I'm going to take now that middle point, and I'm just going to draw in that 10 millimeter radius arc. Now that I have these distances for the rounding, I know it's 10 millimeters to the center point and then another 10 millimeters to the uppermost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my arc tools, and I'm going to select this one that says center start end, and I'm going to move onto that intersection, make sure that I zoom into it and that I snap to that center point. Once I have that, I'm going to go to the uppermost part because it's going anti-clockwise, and I'm going to draw in that solid outline of the rounding and snap off that. Once I have that in place, my rounding there is done with a radius of 10 and a diameter of 20 millimeters. On my reference image, I now have the next flat line that is 20 millimeters before it then creates another round of a radius of 10. So let's first draw that flat line of 10 millimeters, and that I'm going to use my line tool and make that active. Make sure I'm still on the right layer, and by the way, always make sure your layers are set by layer, all the properties and functions of that layer, that it's by layer as I've mentioned in my previous videos. So now I'm going to draw that line of 20 millimeters, and then I escape out of that before we start with the next rounding. Next, I'm going to go back to my arc tool, make sure that I've got my center start end arc tool selected. This is the reference point for that radius of 10. I'm going to go now again, it's anti-clockwise, so I must go to this reference point over here and draw in that quarter arc around there. That gives me that rounding. And now this part here, I can draw it solid and trim it later, or I can leave it as a construction line before I continue with this diagonal part of my drawing. Let's take another look at our reference image. So on the right, we will see there's this part here, this neck part that is 10 millimeters, and therefore I'm going to measure 5 up and down from the center line. Back at our image, I'm going to first clear all the clutter that's here on my paper by going to edit, clear all constructions. And now I'm just going to draw perpendicular to this center line a reference line. I'm going to delete it later. I just want to use that as a reference. So I'm just going to do it. Let's do it on the constructions layer. And I'm just going to draw that 5 millimeters. I'm doing this to create a distance 5 millimeters away from the center line. I could have used other methods as well. I could also have gone and drawn in a light construction arc or circle that I have here, and then I could also just go and extend that to intersect with our circle here. And that will give us the two reference points 5 millimeters away, because in DoubleCAD, this free version, there is not a parallel construction tool, so we have to improvise a little bit. However, in the Pro version and in TurboCAD, you do have those tools. There are several ways that I can get a parallel line to this center line. I can either use this tool over here and just click on that reference point and say 45 degrees and enter and escape out of that. That is one way. Or select this angular tool over here, and what you do is click on a reference point in the angle that you require and reference that, and then you can snap onto that reference point over there. So there are several different ways to achieve your result. I'm going to escape out of that. I go back to my reference image, and on my reference image I see that there's a height of 55 millimeters to that intersection of the center of that circle, and they do not give us the horizontal or X distance, because we can determine it with our Y distance, our 55 millimeter distance. So now that I know that I have 55 millimeters to go up, I'm going to go and use my circular tool, and at any vertical line I can go now and measure 55 millimeters up and create a reference point for myself. Once I've done that, I'm going back to my waterline tools, and I'm going to select the horizontal waterline / construction line tool and plot that reference line there. Where it intersects, it gives me that intersection that I have here. Now you can follow the same procedure to determine those distances on your paper. So remember, you draw the same on paper and on CAD, and therefore you can use the same procedure. And now once I have that reference point, I can just make sure that I draw the 45 degree center line that is perpendicular to the one that I've already determined through that intersection there. I want to make the intensity on the center line a bit better. So I'm going to go and select that line, double click on it or right click properties, go to pen, and I'm always selecting aligned. And then we make sure that we use the third line from the top, which is our center line. And I'm going to change this to 0.3. You can change it to anything else if you like. And then I'm going to click off of that. Now I see that line a bit better, and I see the intersection a bit better. Now there are also different ways to create this perpendicular 45-degree center line that we have on our reference image. So to get this, there are several ways to determine that perpendicular to the long center line. So that's what I'm going to do next. From that reference point, I'm going to go to my construction lines tools. There's different options. I'm going to use this one, and then I'm going to select anywhere on this line because I want to draw perpendicular to it, and then I'm just going to make sure that I snap to that intersection of that 55mm height and 45-degree angle and create that reference point. Now you can already determine the extent of this if you want. It all depends on how your workflow and procedure is by your choice. Here we see that is a box of 40 by 40 that is around this center point, and that there's just been a rounding created to cut off that square box, and then there's an extrusion on this side and also a little bit of a rounding that remained. So we can do this in several ways. So you can also draw the circle in the middle that has got a diameter of 21st, whichever is your preference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that 40 by 40. Now to do that, we are going to use our circular construction tool once more, and we are going to go to that intersection here, and I'm going to draw with a radius of 20 millimeters a big light construction circle. And if you are drawing on paper, you obviously could immediately have gone and drawn a circle, a light construction circle, and therefore I can do that here by going to my construction layer using my circular tool, and I can do the exact same thing as you would have done on paper. It's your preference. So there we have a light construction circle, which shows how I got to my answer. So that is this circle that I have here as a reference that fits inside of that 20 by 20 square box that is now been deformed. Next, on our answer, we can now decide if you want to draw the construction lines of the square box first, or if you want to do the deformation, or if you do want to do the circle. Well, for me it just makes logical sense to first draw the box, because I know that's 40 by 40 and I have to deform it by applying a certain function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the constructions tools and use the vertical construction line, and through the center I'm going to just draw a vertical construction line to give myself a reference at the top, the uppermost curve or part of that curve. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal construction line over there at the top and at the bottom. And I'm also going to go and draw a reference line on the far right of the edge of the circle and the left edge of the circle. That will create for me the square box that I will need to manipulate as I continue to do this drawing. So once I have that, I'm going to use my line tool and I'm going to select the constructions layer, because I want to do a construction and planning first. So of the original shape, which is the square 40 by 40 millimeters, just want to zoom in and make sure that I have the right corner there. And I can either now, as you've seen in the previous videos, right click and say close, and immediately will close that end, But if I say finish, it will not close it and I have to draw that line again. So this time I'm just going to say close, and closes it off to the last reference point. But please remember, it's only once you've activated the second last reference point, you can then right click and close to determine or to close off on the starting point. Before I clear all the construction lines, I want to draw in this neck part's construction lines as well to give me some guidance for later on. So I'm still in the constructions line layer, and I still have just the construction line tool active, and I'm just going to draw a line from here to there and escape out of that, and I'm going to again select that line tool, and I'm going to draw from there to there and escape out of that. Now what I want to do is I just want to draw in a line here as a center line. So I'm going to select my line tool and make sure that I'm on the center lines layer, and I'm going to draw a center line from that corner to that corner, which is perpendicular to the first center line that I've had. And I can change the properties now or later. I want to change it now, so I'm going to select that line, double click on it, or right click properties, go to pen, make sure it's aligned, make sure that is set to 0.2 or 0.3, whichever you prefer, and also make sure it's the third one from the top, and then please OK. Now I've got that center line set up the correct way. I will also lengthen those lines later to the correct length. Now that I have gotten all the reference lines properly set, I can now clear the construction line. So I'm going to go to Edit, Clear All Constructions, and now I have this, and you will see this on your paper drawing as well. And now everything is a bit clearer, and we've cleaned up our canvas. Next thing that we want to do is see if there's anything that we can draw in solid at this stage or not. So we go back to our reference image, and we see here we can draw solid, and there we can draw solid. Here where the neck part intersects with the square, and over there we can also draw those parts solid, and then we'll get back to the rest after that. Now on here I'm going to select my line tool. I'm going to select the solids outline layer, and I'm going to draw in solid that part over there. I'm going to zoom in to make sure I snap to the correct reference point, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to snap to that intersection, which is the outer edge of that square construction, and then I'm going to escape out of that. Then I'm going to select my line tool again. I'm going to snap to this bottom reference point, snap there, zoom out, zoom back in on that outer edge of the square construction. Now you can continue drawing, but yeah, there are features that we still want to draw, so I'm going to first escape out of it and do one thing at a time. Now that I have this, our shape is taking on good form, and we want to make sure that we get all the deformation or the detail on the square part set correctly. So we're going to go to our reference image and see that here we have a rounding that is a radius of 20 millimeters. So we just need to make use of this center point over here, and this center point is a universal center point for many of the features given here, and we want to use that radius of 20 to that arc from that center point, and then we also will use that same arc over here. So I'm going to draw a construction arc that is a light construction here at the bottom, because it's very easy to miss that little bit of rounding over there and over there. That's a sneaky one that you have to be aware of, and the one at the top is obvious. And then we will do the extrusion after that. So let's go back to our answer here. So here we have a radius of 20 already set, so we just need to draw that solid. So we're going to go to our arc tools again, and we're going to use this center start end reference tool. So we are going to use this intersection and center point, stretch to the outer edge at the top, 90 degrees straight above, swing it around to 180 degrees to our horizontal reference point and snap off on that. This one is already construction arc. We will finish those small little curves later. And then we see we can draw in that solid line over there. And we can also draw in those solid lines at the top. So let us select the line tool, and we make sure we are still on our solid outlines layer. From that reference point, draw a solid line there and to there, and escape out of that. You obviously would do the same on paper. I will also draw this one over here to finish that off and go back to our reference image. So we have now finished those vertical and horizontal lines. That arc, we know it's gonna, if we were to draw first, just to be sure, you could do this and draw a light construction line so that you have that reference point. But if your snaps are set correctly, it will automatically snap to those points. But on paper, you can draw in that light construction line as a reference. And now I can also use my line tool again for the solids outline and draw a solid outline to that reference point and escape out of that. And now we have everything that we could do up to there. We could draw the solid circle on the inside just to get our mark. So let's do that. That's a radius of 10 or a diameter of 20. So let's draw that in from the center point. So I'm going to select my circle tool. I'm going to make sure I'm on the outlines layer. And on that reference point, I'm going to go and say a radius of 10 or a diameter of 20 and draw that in solid. Now we're almost done. We will see there's a distance of 10 millimeters from the outer edge of the extrusion. And we will see that the total thickness of that extrusion is 20 millimeters, which means 10 millimeters to the left and right of that center line. Back at our image, let's use now our measuring tool again, our circle construction tool. Anywhere on that line, we're going to just create a reference of 10 millimeters. And once we have that, I'm going to use the perpendicular construction tool just to get myself a reference point on there and there. And then what I'm going to do is click on that same one there to get that parallel line to the center line. And I will select the perpendicular tool again, select any of those lines parallel to the center line. I'm going to draw another construction line that is a reference line so that I can do the extrusion. Now from this arc, I know from my reference image it's 10 millimeters extruded, so I can from this point also go and just measure 10 millimeters out. Now there's different ways you can do that. I'm just going to do the following. Perpendicular to that, I'm going to click on that outer edge. Now I've got a reference line and I want to measure 10 millimeters away from that. So I'm going to use my circular construction tool on that reference point, measure 10 millimeters. And I see I need to extend that center line a little bit. So I'm going to go to my line extend tool and I'm just going to extend it a little bit past there. Once I've done that, I'm going to use my perpendicular tool again. And I'm going to draw a construction line there as well. Now I have that extrusions outline or planning done there, and I can go to my line tool, select the line tool and make sure I use the outline. And once I've done that, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to draw. You can start anywhere. You can either start there at the intersection, wherever you like. I'm going to start at this corner here and draw back towards that intersection there and make sure that I snap to the right place and escape out of that. On paper you will do the same. Also just make sure you use the right reference points. Select the line tool again and I'm going to draw that part and then zoom in on that arc's edge there to that reference point. And once I have that, I'm going to escape out of it and that will create that part. Now I can see the part of the arc with my compass. I can just make that arc solid and also make that part solid with my compass. And I am going to use on my CAD this tool over here that we've been using, the center start end tool. I'm going to go and place my compass on the center of my shape and I'm going to just draw in, and remember it's going anti-clockwise, so I'm going to start here and draw in that solid part, and then I'm selecting that same tool again and move to the center point once more and zoom back to that part that I need to fill in an anti-clockwise direction from that snap to that snap, and then I can zoom out of that, and that gives me the outlines of my shape. And now I can go edit, clear all constructions, and this is what you will see on your paper as well. Now again, I say some of these constructions you would not need if you are drawing on paper, but on CAD you need reference points, and hopefully you can understand and see why I am drawing so many reference lines, because I need reference lines and reference points to snap to, otherwise my snap tools won't work and I can't work accurately. Now again, there are also many different ways to approach it, different ways that you can start your drawing and end your drawing, but you have to decide which workflow works best for you. In this free version of DoubleCAD, you are limited to how your tools work, so you every time have to go back and select the tool that you want to use, which is cumbersome, but as you see, you can easily overcome that if you're just diligent and persevere. So let's see what else we need to do. Our drawing outlines have been done. We have done most of our center lines except these center lines that we have here. So let's go back to our drawing and let's draw in those center lines as well. We do not have to show those hidden detail lines that are here because they just represent the original shape from which we deferred and used our measurements, but you can draw them in if you like. Now what we want to do is just firstly create those center lines. So I'm going to use my line length tool, select the center lines layer, and I'm going to draw in the first center line over there, escape out of it, select the line tool again, it's still on the center lines layer, and draw that center line, snap there, escape out of that, and I will do the same on this side and escape out of that. Now we have those center lines. As I said, if you want, you can change these lines to hidden detail. That is your decision. Let me just show you how to do that. I go to my selector tool, and now it's just a construction line. If I select it, it will select the whole line. I don't need the whole line, but this is anyways at the back. So what we want to do is we want to change it on our layer settings directly over here to hidden detail, and if I click off that, you can see there's a hidden detail. Now if I zoom out, the intensity of that will change, and you can then change those properties the same as you do with a center line. You can also do the same effect with a hidden detail by double clicking on it or right clicking and same pen properties, and then I'm selecting the pen tool. I'm also going to align always, set the dash scale to 0.3, and from the top, hidden detail is the fifth line here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line here that I always select and say OK. And now there you have your hidden detail line, a better intensity. You can do the same here. So let me just select that again, click on it, and now I'm going to do the right click properties just to show you that it gives you the same result. Go to pen and you will select the fifth one from the top, dash scale to 0.3 or whatever you prefer, select OK. And remember, as I've said in my previous videos, I use these settings to get the best print out result on paper. If I were to take this drawing, convert it to PDF and print it out on an A3 printer, these are going to give me the best printing previews and printing results that I want. If you want to do the same for the circle here, it's now one entity. You first need to split it if you want to create a hidden detail effect for this line here in CAD. On paper, you obviously will just draw in the hidden detail. But let me show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to use the selector tool. I'm going to select that line, and you see it's a whole circle is selected, and I don't want to do the whole circle as a hidden detail. I only want that part that I have there. And then I will go to my split entity tools, which we spoke about in previous sessions, select that line, and I will split it off over there, and I will split it off over there. Now that's active, and I go to my selected tool, and now if I have cut that off, you will see only that arc is then, or that segment of the arc is now selected. Now I can go to my layers panel and I can select the hidden detail layer. I can immediately go and change the properties because I know it won't be like I want it. So I'm going to go to pen tool, select align, make it 0.3 and make sure it's hidden detail. So it's the fifth one from the top. Say OK. And now you will see there I have a much better intensity on the hidden detail. And because I set align, that start and end of my hidden detail will come from and flow out of those outer edges. So that's how you do that as a bonus. And now what I need to do is just finish off these center lines because we haven't finished that off properly. So let's go to the center lines, select the center line, each one of them. If I want to have multiple center lines selected simultaneously, I click on the one and then afterwards I hold in shift, I select the one that I need, and then I keep on holding in shift, and I will continue to click on the lines that I want to manipulate. And if I want to now change that, I can double click on this yellow dot or right click on it and say properties. Once I've done that, I go through the same process, go to pen, I go and change my die scale to 0.3, align, and now remember it's a center line, so I'll use the third one from the top and say OK. And then I click off of that. And there we go. Now we have that. And some of you might say that I can't see my center lines properly because I have my construction lines there in the background. Doesn't matter, on the printout it will clearly show. But if you want, you can go and either delete those construction lines, or you can just put them on the back layer by selecting them. And as I have set my toolbars here at the top, I've selected these functions on the toolbar. So this one says send to back, same as shift page down will also send it to the back, and that will just make sure that it is behind my center lines. So on the printout I will see my center lines proper, or if you still don't have the desired effect, you can just go and select those lines and delete them. I'm going to leave it as it is for now. Almost done. I'm going to show you the dimensioning, just some of the dimensions very quickly. Let's take a dimension, let's say for a radius, we take a dimension for the length of something, and then for the degrees. Let's do that so that you can see how to do that. So let's first say, let's use this one for the height. Let's get the dimension for the height. Now on paper you obviously will draw this in yourself, but here is a tool on CAD, as you would have seen from my previous videos. For this I'm going to use the orthogonal dimension tool over here, and I want to measure the distance from that height to that height. So I'm going to select the first one, and let's just use the bottom line, and then I'm going to use that one, and I'm going to use that line there, and I'm going to just drag it out. But now you see it's still on the center lines layer. So while this is active, I can just go to my layers tool and immediately go and select my dimensions tool or layer, and there we have it. We have our dimension. Now you will see there's that 2mm gap. You can't really see it over there, but if I zoom in, you will see there is actually a 2mm gap for the leader lines, and that will give us the first dimension. Now let's do a diameter. Let's use this circle, this full circle. Now for that I go to click and hold, left click and hold on this tool here for dimensions, and then you will see there's for radius and diameter. I'm going to select the diameter in this case, and I'm going to zoom in and click on the edge of my circle, and then I'm going to drag my mouse. You see how far I can drag it? That's how far this leader will then pull it out. Let's say that's where I want it more or less. Once I click on that, you will see the dimension is in a straight continuous line out there. We will change that now so that it is horizontal. Let's do that. I'm going to use my selector tool. I'm going to double click anywhere on that dimension, or you can say right click properties, and then you go to format. At format, you will be able to change here where it says force text horizontal. If you click there, you'll see in this preview, it shows you that that is forcing that text to be horizontal. If I click OK, you will see that take effect here on your answer. Let's look at the angle. So here at the bottom, I can put in the degrees of 45, or you can take any other angle you like, but I'm going to go to my dimensions tools, and I'm going to select here my angular dimension tool. With that active, I'm going to click on the first angle and then also on the second angle, because at first nothing happens, but if I click on the second angle and I select to which line I wanted to show the dimension, I am going to get this result, and I can again make it as large or small as I want. I can have it even on the outside, whichever, but I want it on that side, and I click on that, and that gives me the degrees over there. And that shows me how to do the dimension on this drawing as well, using my basic CAD functions. I'm not done yet because my center lines is not stretched to the correct length. So as you know, I like to make sure that my center lines are also proper. So I'm going to go to my construction circle tool, and here at the top I'm going to snap to the center, and I'm just going to go, I know that that radius there is about 30, but I want to make it a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go say 33. And also with these I want to make it slightly bigger, so I'm going to make that 12. And for this one also, I'm going to make that 12, just slightly bigger, so that I have those center lines extruded just past the outlines of my drawing. And then I'm going, once I've done that, I'm going to use my line length tool. Now, unfortunately, in DoubleCAD with this free version, once again, every time I have to click on a line length tool for each and every line that you want to lengthen. So just be patient and go through the motions. So I'm going to select that line and then drag it to there, select the line length tool, and then drag that again. I can do it past, and this is if you don't have a second reference, so you just come back to it again, and then you do the same with the others. Every time selecting the line length tool. And notice on whichever part of the line you click, if you click it on this side, you will shorten only that part. But if you click on the longest end of it, you will be able to extend the longest end of it. Just be aware of that. Same here. So if I use the line length tool and I select over here, look at what happens. It's going to choose the wrong side. Okay, so escape out of that, choose the line length tool and select the farthest end and pull it to where you want it. The same here again on that side, that one that I want to extend, I want to bring it back to there, and then I do the same on this side. That looks much better. Let's zoom out a little bit, and then I'm going to go edit, clear all constructions to see what my drawing looks like now. Great. So what you can see here is that I've stayed within the perimeters that I have planned from the start. I have even got some space to work with. Here just my dimension is out of the initial planning, but we fortunately left that gap of 20 millimeters there that compensated for conditions like the dimensions. So that's why it's always a good idea to have that 20 millimeter distance from the border's edges. And then if you work out your drawing and your answer, you would see you most likely will always be able to fit your drawing without any problem. Let's look at our answer and the example image and make sure that we have drawn in everything that we needed to. So we've got 3 dimensions, we've got our constructions, we've got our center lines. Let's just check the question here. So copy the given image to scale of 1 to 1. We've done that. Make sure you're using your drawing instruments. Add any 3 dimensions. And the specifications, no freehand was used, all line types was used correctly, and our neatness, accuracy, and line work should be fine. So we have hopefully achieved all of the outcomes of this challenge. Thank you for sticking with me. I hope you enjoyed this drawing. All the best to you.